St. Paul calls Jesus by the feminine. Turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Verse 4, they all drank the same spiritual drink, for they were drinking from a spiritual rock which followed them, and the rock was Christ. Well, first of all, the Roman Catholic scholars who are telling you that you can't call a male by a feminine noun in Greek are either charlatans or liars, or conceivably both. I dare anybody to challenge that fact. Jesus is referred to by a feminine noun himself, and he was a male, just as much a male as Peter was. So if what is being alleged by these Roman Catholic scholars, what they're telling lay people, is true, why did Paul do it, and why don't you know the Greek language if you're a scholar? First Corinthians chapter 3, verse 11. Upon this rock I will build. What does St. Paul tell us? No man can lay a foundation other than the one which is in Jesus Christ. When the scriptures say Christ Jesus, it's him in eternity. When it's Jesus Christ, it's him on earth. God become a man. If you can't build on any foundation, and the context of the chapter is building the church, that's what Paul's talking about. You are God's building. Be careful how you build. If you can't use any other foundation other than Jesus Christ, how can you make the Pope the foundation? You are putting another foundation in the place of the biblical foundation, which is Jesus Christ. What does the New Testament call it when you put somebody in place of Jesus Christ? Antichrist. That is the term in Greek. What does the Pope say he is in Latin? Vicarius Christos. I'm simply translating from the original language what it says and what it obviously means. Nobody in their right mind could seriously propose using a chip of stone as a foundation for a building. Nobody in their right mind who knows anything of the Greek language can say that he had to change the gender because of the sex of Peter, when in fact Jesus had the same sex as Peter, and he was called Petra. Oh, but he spoke Aramaic. He did, but the New Testament was written in Greek largely. We have one patristic reference from Hegesippus that Matthew was in Hebrew. That's one theory supported by one of the church fathers, challenged by others. But if that's true, the word would not be Petros. The word would be Sela. They have no linguistic case, and they have no logical case. How can Peter possibly be this rock? Now, you have to understand what Catholics believe. If you're not a Catholic, if you used to be a Catholic, you know. How many people here used to be Roman Catholic? Look around. Why are you no longer Catholic? The same reason Luther was no longer Catholic, the same reason Calvin was no longer Catholic, the same reason Zwingli was no longer Catholic, the same reason Bucer was no longer Catholic, the same reason Occupatius was no longer Catholic, the same reason Cranber was no longer Roman Catholic, the same reason Tyndale was no longer Roman Catholic. You read the Bible. So their claim is because Jesus gave the keys to Peter, they're the original church, they're the oldest. In fact, The Eastern Orthodox Church makes the same claim. They claim to be the oldest. Jerusalem was in the eastern half of the Roman Empire. Antioch, Caesarea, Ephesus, Corinth, Athens, they were in the east. Church began in the east, came to the Rome later. We're older than Rome. Greek Orthodox Church will make that claim. The Coptic Church in Africa is also very ancient. It would claim to be older. In fact, before the Roman Empire ostensibly Christianized under Constantine the Great, the Armenian Empire had already Christianized. The Armenian Catholic Church would claim to be older institutionally than the Church of Rome. It's not only Rome who makes that claim, other churches have better historical arguments. Now, I, of course, would maintain two things. First and foremostly, oldest is not an institutional age. It is who holds to the original beliefs of the original apostles. That's the oldest. Who believes what the first Christians believed. That's the oldest. It's not based on an institution. It's based on who believes what the apostles believed. Secondly, the book of Acts tells me the original church was the Messianic Jewish church. Jewish people who believe in Jesus the Messiah, Messianic Jews. They are historically the oldest, not Rome. As a matter of fact, if Peter was the first bishop in Rome, why did St. Paul write the epistle to the Romans instead of Peter? Now, I don't deny that Peter was in Rome. He writes metaphorically, she who was in Babylon greets you. But the fact of the matter is, I even heard the late Bishop Fulton J. Sheen admit that there was no agreed comprehensive list of bishops of Rome until the 4th to the 5th century. The Roman Catholic Church began institutionally when Constantine the Great Christianized the Roman Empire for political purposes. Somebody had to come along and rewrite Christendom as a Greco-Roman religion, Hellenizing, based on Platonic philosophy at that time. Later on in the Middle Ages, Thomas Aquinas rewrote it as an Aristotelian religion. That's where the doctrine of transubstantiation was explained by Aristotle's philosophy of accidents, a debunked view of chemistry and physics, but originally it was Platonized by Augustine. Augustine was influenced by people like Ambrose of Milan, by Cyprian of Carthage. This was hundreds of years after the New Testament was written. They had to rewrite Christianity to facilitate it being a religion of the states. And so they had to have a pontiff. When Constantine relocated his capital from Rome to Constantinople, now Istanbul, he bequeathed the imperial title virtually, which was then formalized by another emperor called Justinian. And the Pope became the pontiff. Originally, the pontiff, Pontificus Maximus, the great bridge builder between faiths, was the emperor of pagan Rome. Rome had two kinds of religions, religio licita and religio illicita. You could have any religion you wanted as long as you acknowledged the pontiff. Originally, the Jews had a problem because they wouldn't sacrifice to the emperor. They eventually got a license by sacrificing for the emperor. Make a deal. Once Jewish believers, Messianic Jews, were excommunicated from the synagogue, they lost their license because Christianity was no longer seen as a sect within Judaism, particularly as Gentiles began to become believers in Jesus. So the pontiff then said, every religion is okay as long as you acknowledge the pontiff, but these Christians won't do it. So the pontiff condemned our religion. But every other religion in the Roman Empire was all right. The recently deceased Pope John Paul II, he's convened together in Assisi, Italy, and elsewhere with witch doctors, Sangomas from Africa. I have a picture of him kissing the Koran, a book that says God has no son. in an act of religious reverence. He called the Dalai Lama a great spiritual leader. The Dalai Lama does not even believe there's a creator. Yet he allows himself to be worshipped as a reincarnation of the Buddha. Okay to be a Buddhist, okay to be a Hindu, okay to be a Muslim, okay to be a witch doctor, but there was one particular religion he didn't like. In La Paz, Bolivia, in Santo Domingo, in Mexico, and in Rome. He has called born-again Christians rapacious wolves. As we speak, there are persecution of born-again Christians going on in Latin America.